All right, folks, if we can either get a seat or stand somewhere, or we're getting ready to get started. If there are seats open, just squish in or point them out to somebody. It is a good logo. So if you haven't seen already, that's on X right now. They just launched your public. It's out there. All right, hi, welcome. I know we're live online as well. So my name is Ross Nodurft. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Digital Innovation. Thank you all for joining us today. Just real quick, the Alliance for Digital Innovation is a nonprofit trade association whose mission it is to work with the government and commercial cloud technology providers to make a connection and make sure that there is as little chaff in the way of making partnerships happen as possible. So we're very lucky to work with the FedRAMP program, work with a lot of you companies out here to make sure that there is a clear pathway forward. So we're excited in that vein to have Pete Waterman, who's the director of the FedRAMP Program Management Office, come here and talk to us about where the FedRAMP program is going. We're excited about it, and we're looking forward to partnering with them. So without further ado, Pete.
No clapping necessary. Hey all, I'm Pete. If you can't tell, I'm not really the guy that you get to give a polished presentation to a bunch of people normally, but they hired me for this job and it came with the job. So here we are. I'm gonna be going through this presentation and reading off of a script. So appreciate your patience. It's about 20 minutes. I'm gonna try to get through this quick. There's gonna be some stuff to start with. So first of all, as Ross said, I work at GSA in the FedRAMP Program Management Office. I am communicating today in my official capacity as the FedRAMP Director. The information I plan to share today is provided to enhance transparency between industry and FedRAMP, but it is possible that some of this information may change. I think it is important to have this dialogue so we can move forward in a transparent manner, but I wanted you to have that context before I got into the substance of my presentation. My commitment to you is to continue this dialogue and share new developments with you as soon as I can. Additionally, any reference in this conversation to any specific commercial product, process, or service, or use of any trade, firm, or corporation name is for the information and convenience of the public and does not constitute the endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by GSA. So a lot is changing today about the way the government works, and one incredibly positive change is that FedRAMP can finally engage directly with stakeholders without all of the bureaucracy, aside from slightly awkward disclaimers like that one. I'm going to tell you today about how we're all going to benefit from that change to transform FedRAMP together. I'm about to throw a lot of information at you really fast, but there's one thing that I want you to understand up front, because I'm here to tell you about what's going to change, not what's going to stay the same. The current Rev 5 based agency authorization pipeline will remain open without significant changes, and the agency authorization backlog is expected to be cleared by the end of April, thanks to the incredible work of our contracted public servants who have served with FedRAMP for many years. Once that backlog is cleared, the PMO will continue to process new Rev 5 agency authorizations based on demand. The assessments and materials included in a Rev 5 agency authorization shall be presumed adequate for agency reuse of that FedRAMP authorization. That process is effectively not changing. FedRAMP Rev 5 agency authorizations will remain the only active path to FedRAMP authorization until other paths are finalized and our community has eventually moved on to something better. Or as I said on LinkedIn, keep calm and authorize, okay? So now I'm going to recap the circumstances that led to our current situation. Then I'm going to tell you about how we're going to transform our way out of it. Then we'll discuss delivering a new approach collaboratively in public that better meets everyone's needs. Because FedRAMP today is not meeting our needs. It's not meeting your needs. I hear you loud and clear. The FedRAMP board agrees. The GSA administrator agrees. Why is this so hard? It's because FedRAMP is rooted in the past. FIPS 200, the government standard for the development, implementation, and operation of secure information systems, was published way back in 2006. The approach outlined back then was based on the idea that systems were developed only until they were ready to be put into operation, like a building or a ship. You can use a paperwork-based process to evaluate the security of something that you won't change once it enters operation. That hasn't been how most of us built tech for a long time, though. Modern services are continuously and simultaneously developed and implemented while being operated without downtime and without stopping. None of you would fire your dev teams today and just operate what you've already built. And the government wouldn't want to buy your service if you did. So why are we still using an approach that's designed for that? We shouldn't. We need a new approach that all of us agree on, that is designed to continuously validate the security of systems we build without slowing anyone down. After 5 years of fighting bureaucracy from the inside, I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. The government is not going to figure out how to do this on its own. But if you come to the table with innovative solutions, we can do it with you. The GSA administrator, the Office of the Federal CIO, the FedRAMP board, CISA, and my entire team are on the inside, driving this forward together. We need you to help us from the outside. We've been given clear direction to achieve this. FedRAMP will set the standards that enable private innovation to create the solution. That's how we'll develop and continuously improve a standardized, reusable, cloud-native approach to security assessment and authorization for cloud services. This direction moves FedRAMP away from previous plans to centralize authority and services within the FedRAMP PMO so that we can focus on this mission. Yes, the PMO's workforce and budget has been reduced significantly, but my remaining team was built for this mission and is dedicated to its delivery. The reality is that FedRAMP is so expensive and burdensome right now that most companies never consider it. We need to lower that burden. Before I came to government, I worked at a startup where I ran engineering, and we built something that was really amazing, and it was cloud native, and we had big banks as customers. We had Fortune 500 tech companies as customers. We even had information security companies as customers. And one day, in a conversation with the Department of Justice, I looked at what was required to get approval to sell that software to the government, and we laughed and walked away because it would never be worth our time. Cloud service offerings shouldn't need help to navigate government inefficiency. You shouldn't have to invest millions of dollars up front in hopes of getting federal business in the future. You shouldn't have to fight for sponsorship just to get in the ring. And if you do make it in, you shouldn't have to wait years to get authorized. FedRAMP should be something that your existing engineering and compliance teams can experiment with. Maybe try out some third-party validation systems or play around with settings that your IaaS provider gives you. Maybe do a sprint to see if it's viable to validate your security without paperwork and what you might need to change. If you commit, it should be easy to get listed on our marketplace if you validated your security, and it should be easy to sell directly to agencies. We want it to be worth it for every company to pursue FedRAMP authorization so that public servants can get access to all of the cool stuff that you built. We're going to transform FedRAMP. Instead of the government deciding what is best, we'll collaborate with industry to drive the solution. We'll start now and update our approach continuously. We've all been talking about automating the status quo for way too long. Everyone in this room knows that if it was that easy, we would have done it by now. A future where adversarial AI between industry and government fight over the optimal narrative process or narrative pros and system security plans, it's not in any of our best interest, and it won't ensure our information is secure. Instead, we're going to build a different approach, starting with understanding the underlying security principles that will ensure government information is safe in a continuously evolving commercial environment, key security indicators. Then together, We'll build an assessment process to validate your choices about those key security indicators. FISMA reform or a new approach from NIST would be welcome, but that's not needed today. For nearly 20 years, NIST guidance has clearly explained that the SB 853 is not a checklist and that risk-based decisions should inform the selection, application, and even elimination of controls. And yet over all that time, those controls have been placed into spreadsheets that are used like a checklist by many of us. This approach has resulted in excessive waste and must be redirected to enable government efficiency at scale. FedRAMP will no longer simply select items from a baseline checklist and force cloud service providers to comply by writing hundreds of pages of descriptions about their environment. Instead, we'll use key security indicators as an abstraction layer between government compliance culture and modern security best practices. We'll shift the requirements from extensive descriptions about each individual control on a spreadsheet to continuous validation that the intent behind those controls has been addressed. Instead of humans reviewing printouts, we'll rely on machines backed by trusted IaaS and PaaS offerings that provide validation capabilities for their customers or trusted third-party validation services. We know the capability to rely on automated validation for many security controls already exists, and that host providers often offer secure by design options to make this easier for their customers. Take encryption as an example. Pages and pages of controls and spreadsheets can be simplified into a single key security indicator. Federal information is encrypted when stored and transmitted. There are many ways to validate encryption decisions automatically on modern infrastructure without anyone looking at a spreadsheet. You might regularly run a compliance tool that pulls the configuration of all systems and alerts you to discrepancies. You might rely entirely on infrastructure as code to deploy your stack in a way that bakes encryption into everything by default. You might even use agentic services that continuously override insecure configurations to enforce the expected configuration. And if you've built something primarily cloud native on FedRAMP authorized IaaS or PaaS providers that understand the value of security by design, maybe you can just check the FedRAMP encryption box for your tenant and never think about it again. Encryption is just one example. The vast majority of underlying security requirements for the SB 853B can be validated in the same automated way if we approach them in the abstract. No one should ever be manually reviewing an old spreadsheet that has some screenshots next to it and pretend that that's a security assessment. We need to drive this type of change together as a community. You bring the solutions, we'll vet them with agencies and set standards to match. IaaS and PaaS folks, we have some of those in the room here. Some nods, all right. You guys can make your system secure by design, or at least provide some capabilities so customers using your services can validate their own security. Third-party compliance tools, anyone? There are endless possibilities ahead of you. Find your niche and build something cool. If you build validation software, you won't be excluded anymore. We'll all work with you to figure out multi-party validation in a way that includes you in the FedRAMP ecosystem without requiring a federal agency sponsor. For everyone else, all the other cloud service providers of varying scale and complexity, you can adopt these capabilities where, when, and how you can. Update your architecture to take advantage of them as they become available. Start small, go big, and get secure. For everyone else, figure out where you can add value and plug in. There's plenty of room inside this for new ideas. FedRAMP will be here the entire time to support and learn from industry, setting the standards based on your innovations that push you and the rest of the government ever forward towards the ultimate goal of automating everything. Because at the end of the day, automation is effectively a Boolean decision. Can I trust this company? True or false? Is this cloud service secure enough for my specific needs? True or false? Will I authorize its use? True or false? It's that simple and that complex, but this should be our goal. I think we can do it. I think that you can make it happen. All of your companies employ legions of the best engineers, architects, designers, and product managers in the world. You want to win this, you want to build this, put them to work. I think, based on my own experience building cloud services, that there are probably thousands of cloud services out there today that would never consider investing in a FedRAMP Rev 5 authorization. But they're simple enough that they could deploy something on a trusted FedRAMP authorized IaaS or PaaS and get more than halfway to automatically validating the technical controls required for a low authorization in days if we build that path. So that's where we'll start. Let's figure out what maximal automated validation looks like for a simple SaaS cloud service offering like that. A company whose cloud environment has no trusted external connections and only provides services over the web. Ideally, one that cares and aligns with a commercial security framework and has a product that supports basic security features that federal agencies need, or they're willing to build it. We'll nail down the key security indicators that match a FedRAMP low authorization. My team has already done a lot of work on this over the past couple of weeks to get started. Then you all tell me how you can help such offerings validate their configuration. You don't all have to agree on the approach or do it the same way. It's the outcome that matters. If the approach is reasonable and the outcome is legit, we'll validate the approach, any approach. From there, we just keep going, continually adding key security indicators and pulling in various existing frameworks as we simplify more and more controls and solve more complex use cases like multi-party, multi-service, multi-cloud validation. Eventually, we'll come for the big IaaS and PaaS providers too. It won't be as easy for you, but we'll see it through if you will. You can't keep pushing paper forever. I don't have all the answers to how to do this, but I'll bring the coffee and donuts. Actually, that might be against some weird law I don't know about, so instead, I will just bring the forum. Next week, FedRAMP is going to start launching 4 community working groups that will be entirely open to the public, operating entirely in public to ensure that everyone has fair and equal access to information. We're going to set the tone and host some discussion, but a lot will depend on you and what you bring. The first group will help Rev 5 authorized cloud service providers align on and adopt a new standard for continuous monitoring and reporting to their agency customers. One that makes the most sense for everyone, where features aren't held up by slow decision processes and without the PMO in the middle. Let's definitely figure out what government customers need to trust you to make your own decisions about changing. The next one, the biggest group, will push that idea that I just discussed about automated validation. What technical controls do we validate? How do we actually validate them? How can we trust someone who says they've validated something? Let's pilot anything and everything, try everything, and solve this in flight. Next, we'll kick off a group to focus on understanding how the documentation of management controls in other industry security frameworks can apply directly to FedRAMP. If your change management policy is mega change 2000 certified or something, maybe you can just bring that and answer 1 or 2 questions instead of writing something entirely new for FedRAMP. Let's figure that out. And of course, if validation is happening continuously, automatically, what do you monitor and report on without annual assessments? CSPs still need clear standards for reporting incidents, for sharing plans about continuous improvement, for showing that vulnerabilities are mitigated, and everything else that their customers might worry about. I call these community working groups for a reason. Our community will achieve more if we work together than we'll achieve if you wait for the government to solve your problems. If a cloud service offering is secure, if it's simple, if it's cloud native on a trusted platform, And if everyone there makes good choices that put the customer first and ensures government information will be safe, and if we can validate most of those decisions continuously, then why should we put them through a paperwork process designed 2 decades ago? We want the same outcome from that process, improved information security. But let's get those outcomes without years of work and millions of dollars. Public servants deserve access to modern tools. FedRAMP will ensure they get them with your help. This is the dawn of something new. Let's build it together.
All right, for the folks online, here's how it's gonna work. I've got a handful of questions I'm gonna ask Pete. We've got him for another about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I'll ask a few questions and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. Dan Wolf, who's the Director of State Programs for ADI in the back, is gonna be running the mic for those. So what I'd ask you to do if you're asking a question is to raise your hand. Dan will identify you. Say your name and the company that you're working with, and then ask Pete a question. All right, Pete, thank you for that. We appreciate it. I know we've been waiting to hear with bated breath kind of what the vision looks like. So it's great, and we're excited about it. So understanding you've been kind of noodling on this for a while. How has it been received to date as you've kind of slowly and quietly had some conversations around with folks?
So I've got a couple really cool pages of quotes of very, very excited people, and then like a couple, maybe 6 bullets of people that aren't super excited. So generally pretty good. I think when we started to develop this process.
Here, do me a favor, hold it up higher. Hold it up higher on the.
Oh, all right. See, I told you I wasn't good at this stuff. Okay, so when we started to develop this process, this idea, and really push it forward 3 weeks ago when we received the go for this, one of the things that we need to do was validate these ideas with external stakeholders. And many of you during that time reached out to me, and I appreciate all of your patience because it was just impossible for us to create a process that would have allowed me to talk to every single person that wanted to talk to me during that time. So I worked very strongly with my legal team to come up with a framework that identified a specific groups of individuals or groups, characteristics of people that we need to talk to and validate with. We spoke to those folks, and almost universally, I found maybe a little bit too much of a no duh kind of reaction from everyone. Like, yes, we've been building this, we've been doing this, we've been yelling at FedRAMP, we've been yelling at the government for years. Thank you, we will help. So that makes me really excited. That's great.
That's great. All right. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty now. So one of the things that a lot of the folks in this room, when they approach FedRAMP, they're looking at the whole of government, right? They're looking at reciprocity between DoD with the cloud computing SRG. They're looking at CMMC reciprocity. How is it working right now in your conversations? Are you having conversations with the Department of Defense to date? And what does that interaction look like?
So if you follow FedRAMP closely, you probably know that we have a board that is composed of a bunch of top-level executives from different agencies and includes multiple members from the DoD community. We've met with them multiple times and been in open conversation with them about this. They are very, very excited. Obviously, they're a little bit nervous about how fast this is moving. Again, 3 weeks. But the whole point is for us to build this together in public, and they will be there with us, making sure that there's adoption here. I do think it's important to just level set one expectation, because I hear this a lot. FedRAMP's remit, very explicitly in the law, is to design an approach, a reusable approach for federal agencies. So that does not, our use case, our time, our effort is not spent on an approach that would work for the DIB necessarily. That's where the DoD works with us to readopt our approach and develop things like FedRAMP equivalency. So I expect to see a lot more of that. And as we prove success and like you all build the systems and tools that do this, I think we're going to be really strong with DoD support.
That's great. All right. So let's talk about some of the shared services. You guys have a smaller team. You said that at the beginning. You guys are looking to be a little more nimble, a little more or lightweight in how you're approaching this. You're setting standards. Is there anything else from a shared service standpoint that you guys are doing? Is there anything else that you guys are maintaining going forward? You talked about can you reiterate what you said at the top about existing Rev 5 baseline?
Yeah, so the Rev 5 process continues. Actually, before I go, like as I'm talking, my voice fades in and out, and I don't know if that's actually, okay, that's not happening to everyone else, perfect. The Rev 5 process continues to be operated the same way as it was today. Over the past 4 months, I have been working extensively with the FedRAMP board to identify ways to improve the PMO side of that process that relied more on the risks assessments and the adequacy performed by agencies. It is currently my projection that the funding for the contract that supports that will carry us through completing the authorization of the backlog in the next month to month and a half. After that, the federal staff that are remaining should be able to maintain and keep up with historical levels of demand. If we see a big spike in Rev 5 authorizations this year and suddenly 200 of them enter the queue, we'll have to address that when the time comes. But for now, that's what we're looking at, is continuing to run that service and capability just as it was. We'll also continue to, in the near term, control package access and that whole environment for everyone. I hope that we can all together build a system that allows you all to use your existing trust centers to connect directly with government customers and avoid that process. But we'll work on that. So the centralized services that we will be focusing on is almost entirely that concept of setting standards, providing that technical assistance and workbooks to help everyone do this, and coordinating with OMB and the FedRAMP board to really make sure that agencies get on board with this.
So real quick question too, the FedRAMP marketplace, is that something that will continue?
Yes, I imagine a world where the FedRAMP marketplace is a comparison shopping tool for federal agencies that connects directly to information provided by all of you, because I don't like having to get emails from you all of the time asking us to change the text on our webpage. So it'd be great if we could just have a system where you make that available to us via API, you do whatever changes you want, and we just pull it all the time.
All right, so this is getting a little tougher. How are we going to that? So you guys are going to set standards. There's no secret that the risk management in law is given to the agencies. So if you're setting a standard, and that standard is for all intents and purposes, a outcome-driven security standard. You're taking into account some stuff that is being currently accepted in the commercial marketplace. How do you successfully navigate agency authorizing officials who will look at that and say, okay, is this my ceiling or is this my floor? And am I going to ask a ton of other questions on top of it?
I mean, have we solved that problem right now? No, right? So that's kind of the first thing to keep in mind, is that problem exists. So as we change, solving that problem becomes important, but it doesn't automatically reset everything. This idea of a bunch of AOs that just want to go their own way, the ones that are going their own way will probably keep going their own way until things change for them. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about. Another is that you look at me here today, look at the conversation we're having today. Everything is changing in the government. The expectations are different. The empowerment is different. And everyone is willing to look at and consider things with a slightly different perspective because they have to. I think we're going to see significant changes that incentivize improvements that result in better security. Like the first step is kind of admitting that the work that we do right now, while it does improve the security of systems by forcing people to think about a bunch of decisions, We can't prove it. We have no data that says like it has worked. We don't know that any of you are actually running your systems in the way that you and your auditors told us you were running them because you changed them. There's no genuine security wrapped around all of this. So if people want to be secure, they want their systems to be secure, they want to meet their requirements under the law, they want to do it in a way that's easier for them, that doesn't take years, that doesn't open this opportunity right now. Sorry, this I'm going to go on a little soapbox right now. One of the things you all hate is the agency sponsorship, right? And how that creates this weird incentive where no agency wants to sponsor a cloud service provider because they're just hoping that somebody else will do it. And then years and years go by and nobody's done it because everybody wants somebody else to do it. So if we just make it so that they can do that in 3 days by running some programs and looking at the output from some reports and having a conversation with a red team in a room for 4 hours, then you don't have to wait years and they don't have to wait years. And the thing is on the other side of this is while yes, there are a lot of agency AOs out there that really are focused on risk and they really don't want to take on risk. They think they're going to go to FISMA jail or they just genuinely believe in it. Like that's okay. We can change that culture. But more importantly, there's a whole bunch of AOs out there that want good stuff. They want it fast. And the reason that they can't get it is because it's not happening fast enough and they don't have an easy enough route to it. So if we develop something and we build something and we set the standard and the FedRAMP board aligns with it and we start delivering this stuff into the big agencies, I'm hoping, I'm betting, there's no money on it, right? But like that is how I think we change this. This is a different approach. This isn't figure it all out and answer all the questions first and then start doing it. This is we have theories. We have a hypothesis that we can improve this system by making changes to the inputs in this careful, deliberate way. And we'll find out. And if it doesn't have the effect, we'll adjust. And if AOs don't like it, we'll teach them, we'll train them, we'll work with them. The board will do that. You will all do that. And you can also ultimately at the end of the day, look, industry, you're in control here. The government is a customer. Treat them like a customer, right? If they don't want to buy your thing, why are you wasting your time? Find somebody that will. And if we do this right, there will be enough people that will want to buy your thing that you won't have to worry about those few angry people holding the line on something from 2006. That's my theory.
So I have one, maybe two more questions left, then we'll open up the audience. So get ready. I want to talk about the process for interaction, right? We talked about, you guys it's an iterative process. The standards, assuming we continue to develop new tech, are going to continue to iterate as well. So let's start with the present. You put the slide up for the working groups, which I'm sure is now available online for people to see. Explain to me what that interaction looks like. How are the working groups going to actually function? Can you talk a little bit about that?
We're going to figure that out together. So here's the theory behind this. I spent most of my life in private sector as a participant in a lot of communities where I could go somewhere and talk to a whole bunch of other people that were interested in the same thing I was interested in. When I started at FedRAMP, I was really surprised to find out that basically LinkedIn was the only real community there. I mean, sure, there's the subreddit and there's like the CUI Discord and stuff like that, but those aren't real powerful, engaging opportunities to actually talk to people. And at one point I even found about a cool mailing list that has a bunch of stuff and I wanted to join it and I was told I couldn't because they don't want someone from FedRAMP there. And it just kind of like, okay. So what I am looking for, what we are looking for, what the government is looking for out of this, I spent a bunch of time working with my counsel, with the Office of General Counsel, to find out if we could do this and how we could do this and make sure that we're not breaking all these weird laws like the Federal Advisory Committee Act and Administrative Procedures Act and all that. And basically we came up with a process where we can have these public groups where we, FedRAMP, can't ask you to do things. But we can say, we're interested in understanding how industry goes about doing this. We're interested in this. And we can basically take what is the traditional RFI process, the request for information process, or the the request for comment process that we use that is bureaucratic and it is slow and it takes forever and none of you actually feel like you get anything out of that interaction. Let's replace that with something continuous that we're working to understand the right things and how things go. So that's what we'll do with the working groups is try to guide discussion towards things, but also let you come to the table. I get a lot of emails from folks. I've got this great idea. You guys should do this. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time, resources, money, budget, or effort to do that, but I can help you do that and I can see what happens when you do that. So that's what these are supposed to be. I do want to be very, very clear that those groups are not to advise us. Those groups are not to give us consensus advice. Those groups are an attempt to create and establish a community where we work together and talk about things in public with each other. So there's no more ghost rules and regulations. There's just, everybody has equal and fair access to all the same information, including me and my team, because my team wants to know what you all are doing. Then, as we monitor that, as we see things that work, and as we see some generally good ideas, and as we see standards that folks align towards, we will develop that standard that supports that, and then we'll send that through our formal request for comment process that is required by law to make sure that we standardize that. So this is basically 24/7, 365, endless piloting of new ideas with us here ready to learn from that and interact with you. If that sounded like a really long-winded inspirational answer that didn't actually say how things are going to work, that's because we don't know. So here's what we're looking at. GitHub-based discussion forums, because that's a tool that we have access to and the information is available to the public. If you can't sign up for it and use it for work, let me know and we'll work on a different alternative for you. But generally, since that is open and available to the public, that meets our needs. Second, we're going to have bi-weekly town halls and Zoom conferences where we're going to host open discussion and talk about things. My team is going to work on summarizing weekly and bi-weekly activity, making sure that there is a constant set of current and accurate information that summarizes the discussions and the progress and the things that people have done and said. And that's going to be our job. The vast majority of my team, that's what they're going to be working on for the next couple of months, is figuring out how to make these work. And then we'll see.
Thank you. All right, let's open it up for questions. All right, we're going to start on the right and go this way. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we'll start with you. Stand up, just tell us who you're with and hold it from the neck.
Hi, my name is Courtney Manning. I work at the American Security Project and I do policy advising and support for these issues. There's a lot of talk in this setting about how to work with the authorities and delegation of responsibilities under the current legislative and regulatory regime, your so-called weird laws. But what if some of these laws and rules could be changed? Is FedRAMP in contact with congresspeople, committees, commissions who are aware of the frustrations of, say, waiting years for agency sponsorship due to the way that the laws are, and is proposing amendments and streamlining provisions to Congress and rulemaking authorities part of the process that you have planned for revolutionizing FedRAMP? Thank you.
So asking Congress to change things is not within the scope of my responsibilities, and I think in some ways may be considered something I'm not supposed to do. I'm certainly not supposed to lobby Congress. That said, I am a civil servant. I'm available to members of Congress, and we have lots of very, very fancy people in GSA that like to help make those conversations go well and go smooth. And I am certainly available for any of those that come through.
Hi, I'm Megan Hennessy. I'm from Anishon. I do compliance management. I've been an auditor for about 7 years and then in consulting for 2. It's been a long time that, I mean, it's kind of like an industry standard that the independent third-party assessors are really integral to the whole authorization part, and I haven't seen you mention anything of that. What are you guys planning on doing with 3 PAOs? What's the intent there?
So as I mentioned, the Rev 5 process, which you're referring to, is not changing. That still has everything else. As far as a new process where there's a strong reliance on technical validation, on moving away from point in time audits, that's going to be up to us all in our working groups to figure out what the best place to plug in 3PAOs. There's obviously not going to, we're not going to automate everything. All right, there's plenty of controls that can't be automated. So that will continue to be a third-party assessment responsibility. But as soon as we can get to as much as possible of automated validation, like that's the goal. So for 3PAOs, I say the same thing. We got working groups, they're public. Come work with us.
Hi, I'm Paul Crane with Darktrace Federal. And first of all, thank you very much. And second of all, I applaud you. I love the shipbuilding analogy, right? Build once, use the same way forever. We're no longer in that space. So can you share a little bit more about your vision and how you want to push industry to provide, and do you plan to provide guidance to the agencies on the types of real-time situational awareness, reporting, and automation standards that will demonstrate an improved security posture versus a paper-based system?
So it's a little bit weird, kind of going back to my first answer. It's a little bit weird to talk about my vision, right? I'm here to represent GSA. So my vision is a combination of the fair enough. My vision is for people that didn't hear that, someone's phone said, sorry, I don't understand. So when you have these conversations with me, what you're getting is a distilled output from an endless amount of stakeholder conversations. My job is to talk to people and to understand their needs. And then I also have a job of managing a whole bunch of people in a team, but like I have to connect those two things. So when I talk about my vision, what I mean is like FedRAMP's vision, GSA's vision, the government's vision, the board's vision. It is to move towards something where we can know across the entire federal government at any point in time the exact relative security posture of every system that we're using. And we want to do that without causing you all a bunch of pain. We want to do that by making it easier for you. We want to do that using the systems and capabilities that you have. We want to do that in a way that enables you to advance your own security to your own benefit, to the benefit of everyone other than Gov customers. So as we go through this, what I kind of encourage everyone to think about is taking the opposite tact, especially given this working group thing that I'm going to keep talking about. And instead of asking me what I think industry should give to the government, you tell me what you think you should give to the government and how you should give it and why it matters. And we'll pay attention to that as long as it's going to meet our needs.
I put your working group slide up here so people can look at it. Karen.
Hello, Karen Lawton from Wolfire. So, I've been doing this since the beginning of FedRAMP 1.0, I guess. And one of the challenges we've had is educating agencies on the FedRAMP process and everything like that. And here we are, 11, 12 years later, and a lot of them still don't get it. So now we've got, every cloud service provider potentially doing this differently, presenting the information to them differently from what they're used to. Maybe one cloud service provider is presenting it this way and the next one's going to be presenting it this way. And we're expecting the agencies who could potentially have multiple cloud service providers within their ecosystem to figure out how to consume this data, validate the risk is acceptable to their agency in multiple different frameworks. Concerns. So I guess what type of, are you guys going to have outreach, and are they expected to be part of these working groups as well? Or how are we going to educate or even provide maybe more of a centralized reporting framework so that they can easily be able to interpret the risk and make those risk-based decisions for their agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to really just highlight the entire point of setting standards is to avoid that scenario, right? To avoid a scenario where different CSPs are saying things in different ways, and a cloud service and an agency has to interpret that. If we align on standards, that show how the cloud service providers report that information, how 3PAOs assess it, et cetera. That includes standards for how agencies adopt that information. This is something that is somewhat missing in the current process, as you very well stated, because in the default FedRAMP authorization process, we just throw out some spreadsheets, cloud service providers figure out how to navigate that. They pay a bunch of government consultants a lot of money to help them figure out how to do that with agencies. Half the time the agency's never done it before. They don't know what's going on. Like that is a whole problem, and it has caused a lot of problems. So our goal of standardizing and simplifying and getting this information out there is to help solve that problem. But this is really, really important. My job is not to convince agencies that they should trust what I do. My job is not to accept the risk. When I say my job, I mean FedRAMP, not me personally. I just happen to be in whoever's in this role. Like, we're not responsible for risk. We're not an oversight authority. We don't do most of those things. We set standards. We set approaches. So it is really important that we rely on our partners in industry to help communicate in a consistent way, to make sure that you're not saying different things and bringing different things to agencies. It's also very important that we do this in public, so everyone has access to the information. Right now, go to our website, it's really confusing. I'm hoping we can get somebody to help fix that soon. And generally, I have to then rely on OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, the FedRAMP Board, the CIO Council. There are all of these engines within government that are designed to do this. Those engines have kind of broken down in the past and haven't really pushed forward standardization. I think we're going to see that change. I'm not going to be able to change it, but I think we're going to see a change.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for putting this together. My name is Dr. Diana Allen. I am a FedRAMP program manager at Cribble. When you talk about increasing efficiencies and having a reduced workforce, I wonder how the engagement with FedRAMP would actually work. Do you foresee changes in actual submission? So from having a kickoff meeting to the documentation that we need to submit, how do you see that changing, and what would be the engagement with your leaner team? Because you're adding community working groups, you're adding biweekly sessions, you're reducing, but the workload is still the same. So when you go from 50 people to 25 people and add more meetings, because we all need more meetings, how do you foresee that engagement with us as industry experts facilitating with your organization and your team? Tangibly, tactically.
We're going from more to less than that, just for the record. I assume you're referring to the Rev 5 process, because those questions are related to the current process. And that process is really supposed to be owned by the agency. It's the reason why it's called an agency authorization process. And that's a situation where the 3PAOs provide their real demonstrable value. So the way that process should work, and the way that process will continue to work, is that a cloud service provider works with an agency to potentially sponsor them into FedRAMP. And again, sponsor is a terrible word that I really shouldn't say. It just means be the first to pay the money to do the ATO. That's all it means, right? So it's just somebody that has the money, time, and effort to do the ATO. So you're gonna work with them and your 3PAO to make sure you have a good, buttoned up, solid assessment. The agency is gonna review those materials. Under the law, if the agency provides an authorization, that is adequate for reuse. That is the FedRAMP process. They do the authorization. Then it comes to the PMO. And in the past, there was a centralized sort of triple check process that the PMO did that built up over time into this big, rough, perhaps explicitly excessive process that caused a lot of problems, that doubted the work that your 3PAOs did, that nitpicked things, and that really failed agencies and cloud service providers by adding months. That process was trending towards a year when I joined as a FedRAMP director, and every single person from Congress to the FedRAMP board to OMB to all my stakeholders across government to every CSP I talked to, made it very, very clear that that was unacceptable and we needed to fix that. And I still have some bruises from that. But I worked with the FedRAMP board and we worked with agencies to understand what was happening there. We worked with our incredible partners at Novelist that run this process to identify ways to improve it, where we could rely more on the output from the 3POs, we could rely more on what the agency AOs were doing. And we realized that when it really came down to it, we don't need to spend months of time looking at a package. FedRAMP didn't used to do that for a long time. At some point during the COVID pandemic, there was a shift in posture when cloud services exploded. And so what we have done is we have taken that dial back down to that risk-based approach. We look at it, we assess the risks. An agency AO already assessed the risks, so we know what they're looking at. And then we make sure that every other agency can make a risk-informed decision. So the materials in that assessment are adequate for their use for making a risk-informed decision. Now, this is where folks can get a little bit upset at me, because what that means is, and the way it's always been and the way it always will be, that doesn't mean that if something gets FedRAMP authorized, then every agency can just sign it and not pay attention, right? They have to make that risk-based decision. So our job is now just to make sure that they have the information to make that risk-based decision. So I expect us right now, if you talk to people that are going through the final process as we're kind of burning through some of this, we are not doing those kickoff meetings and things like that unless we need to. So you know, I'm looking at a few people that I know I've gone through recently that didn't even have a discussion with the PMO because we looked at it, we went through it, and we said it's good. We don't have any questions. You're good to go.
Great. Okay, Evgeny, can you? He's had his hand up for a while, and then we'll go in the back, and I'll go here next.
Thank you so much. Evgeny Jervis from SafeLogic. Thank you for being here. Great presentation. A question, you mentioned setting the standards. You mentioned key security indicators. You specifically actually zeroed in on encryption. As far as encryption is concerned, is it safe to assume that requirements for FIPS 140 role data encryption are not going away, notwithstanding some of the changes you already communicated for update streams?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go away. But I am a big fan of looking at that, and I expect that I expect that is something that's going to be on a lot of people's minds. But that is one of those situations where it is very explicit in the NIST guidance that we must follow that. So,
thank you.
Hi, Pete. Rainer, via work for DocuSign as a public sector lead. Thanks for coming, and thanks ADI for hosting this. I'm curious about the Rev 5 continuous monitoring. You said that's going to stay the same. Do you foresee yourself or the team collaborating more with DISA and that AO? They're completely oversubscribed, as you may know. That can use a revamp, and they can use all the help. It's a thankless job. And also, as it relates to the FedRAMP moderate controls, where do you see that kind of coming into the, reforming based on the planning there?
this is amazing. They do so much, and they're also going through similar experiences, right? Everyone across government is getting smaller. This working group up here in I think the upper left, right, the Rev 5 monitoring working group, what I really want that to focus on is creating that reasonable standard that works best for cloud service providers, like actually really interrogating the continuous monitoring process under Rev 5. So rather than, for example, you sending us terabytes of scan logs and us having a thing that we parse and send out reports and things like that, which is also what DISA does, we want to work towards a situation where you can just generate the outcomes or the output that we need to look at and that agencies need to look at. And we want to know what that is. We're also, just to be clear, these are public working groups. There's also going to be some interagency working groups that we're going to be standing up a bit later that will focus on things like this without the public's input. So the intent there is really to move towards an idea where you're a cloud service provider, you're being used by 14 different agencies. You shouldn't have one master agency that is doing all of the work and effort to monitor your product, where if they're busy, you don't get to talk to them and things get delayed and your other customers are going, hey, I want this feature. And you're saying, sorry, this other agency is holding up, right? What we want is a process where you make the same information available to all of your customers. they can review that at their own cadence or pace based on their own risk appetite and let you know if they don't like things that you're doing. And then you can choose, this is the crazy thing, that you've always had this option, but you can choose as a business whether or not you want to do business with customers that ask you to do things you don't want to do, right? So if you got one customer that is constantly complaining about that red box in your report, instead of fixing that for the whole government, if all of your other customers are cool with it, make your own decisions about how you want to handle that. And I really think there's a lot of opportunity to improve that here. Vulnerabilities especially is something that I really, really would like to see us move towards a place where we're talking about mitigation posture for vulnerabilities, not whether or not there's a red box on a spreadsheet. Because like, I don't care if there's some exploitable library sitting on a system in a way that can never be exposed to the internet or any user, even though it shows up as red in a report. If that's properly mitigated, then let's demonstrate that. So that's what we want to work on, is figuring out what that looks like for you all to generate meaningful data and validate that with us so that we're not looking at spreadsheets. Again, nobody looking at spreadsheets. Going to expanding the new concept to moderate, I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see key security indicators punch out in different directions. I would really like personally to see us move towards a world where we are not assigning the exact same levels of controls and requirements based on low, moderate, high, but again, following the guidance in the SB 853 that you can tailor away and add and remove things based on that. So you can have a system where I want really, really, really high availability, but I don't care about the confidentiality, like at all, because it's going to be public, right? And maybe the integrity, I don't really care about it because I'm going to have some system that's going to automatically validate and enforce the integrity myself. So you shouldn't have to get a high baseline across everything in order to get rewarded for having a system that has high availability. I'd like to see us get to that.
I'm going to ask two real quick questions just for clarification purposes. So with the Rev 5 continuous monitoring process that's continuing, sponsorships will continue to be in play until we move through the phases, correct?
Yeah, my hope is to dismantle that, like really bluntly, as quickly as possible, as quickly as agencies are comfortable with that. There's not a single agency that is like, yeah, you know what I want to do is send one of my 3 ISOs to this meeting every month to look at a spreadsheet. So we got to make it a lot easier for them so that instead they're all just paying attention, you know, as part of their normal job duties, and it's not a big burden for everyone.
But in the short run, it'll still be in place for the high baseline, correct?
Yeah. So it's really important. Well, so I misunderstood where you're going with that. So Rev 5 continuous monitoring, we want to change that for everything. That goes across all baselines. Like we're going to do that. As far as like when it happens, how it happens, just the reminder is that we are piloting and working towards changes. And once we get to a place where we think we've got alignment, we'll create a standard and we will publish that for public comment. And then we will respond to that public comment, et cetera. So like, there's never just going to be a day where anybody finds out the way that they have in the last few weeks when they found out the PMO wasn't doing their monitoring anymore. There's not going to be those days when it happens to CSPs anymore, hopefully, because we're talking about guidance that we're changing.
And then the last question is around OSCAL. Is that going to be part of the discussions going forward? Where does OSCAL fit into this? I know a lot of people here have kind of invested in moving towards OSCAL.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I think I would say I'm not particularly invested in pushing any platform or approach. I think I made that pretty clear that I like any approach that works, that matches the standard. There's definitely room for OSCAL. There's no doubt. It's a very, very powerful tool. Is it going to be the best to meet our needs in this? I don't know. We're gonna figure that out together.
All right. One last question, and then I think we'll call it wraps for the day. Is that all right?
I mean, I'll go forever.
All right. Well, if you want to stick around, we'll be here for a little bit.
Hey, Pete, Shrav Mehta, CEO of Secure Frame. So thank you first for driving this change in the government. You know, this has been happening on the commercial side along the continuous monitoring lines for quite a while. So I'm excited to see this change in government. And so one of the questions I had was actually kind of right around OSCAL and how some of these standards are actually tactically going to get, decided. And on GitHub, one of the things that happens is people author a project and the discussion sections are usually people fighting it out. And there's usually kind of a core arbitrator who's the author of the project. Or are you going to be playing that role of that core arbitrator, in the discussions, because there is effectively no author? And then, like, do you imagine there being forks of OSCAL or some changes in that standard?
So I hope I'm not going to be too involved in those discussions, although I'll probably dip in there because I can't help myself. That's definitely going to be my team working there. My team is awesome. I've got a bunch of really, I mean, this is crazy. Our security branch went from like 2 people to 9 people in basically the first couple weeks of January. So we've got some really strong folks that we brought on just for this. I mean, we thought it would take us a little bit longer to go this way, but this is what we're looking at. So they're going to be involved. What we've identified to start with is two kind of major roles that are going to be a part of every community working group. There's going to be a community manager, and that person is responsible for just making sure that the information is communicated well, the flow is working, that people are understanding what's going on, scheduling the meetings, hosting those meetings, etc. And then we're going to have a FedRAMP advocate. If any of these start to sound familiar, this is based on a very common pattern called developer relations that I've been really big on trying to bring into this concept since I joined. We're going to have these FedRAMP advocates that will be participating in the conversation as peers, right? Tell me more about this. Let me see this, etc. But I need to be really, really specific here. The goal of these groups is not for the government to drive anyone towards any specific solution or other, right? We are just here to communicate, clarify, etc. So an example of that might be if someone has a question about, hey, do we think this particular implementation would be adequate to address a key security indicator? We might chime in with some thoughts. Like, that's a technical discussion. That is not a commitment on behalf of the General Services Administration that is, secure, right? Like, we're going to have carefully scoped conversations, but we'll be participating and we'll be trying to move things forward. And then again, as we start to lock things in and dial it in, then we'll produce those standards that go through public comment. And just be very, very clear, this whole process will involve a lot of back channeling with agencies, with CISA, with the FedRAMP board. Like, I don't get to do stuff on my own. I don't know if you knew that. I don't get to do things on my own. I have to ask a lot of people for permission before I open my mouth.
That's great. So look, we're at time, and we appreciate you taking as much time as you did with us. I encourage everybody to sign up for the working groups at the website below. We're going to sign up for the working groups and participate. And we at ADI are going to be here to help facilitate educational conversations within agencies. We'll however you need us to help you, we're here for you. But thank you very much. Let's give Pete a round of applause.
I don't need applause. I'm not in it for the applause, and I think it's if I'm just going to take like a moment, like, we're here. My team is here because we believe in this mission. We want to see this through. That's why we're still coming into work every day. That's why we're focused on this. So the best applause you can give me is show up to these working groups and help us build this thing so that I don't look like a douchebag sitting up here for the next year and a half talking about how one day we're going to automatically validate stuff and you're all like, nah, I don't like that. All right.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you, guys. And look, we have a reception out back, so you guys come hang out for a little bit. We're not going anywhere. Thank you very much.